got one that can see.
The story about the Exodus gives us an account of what happened when the children of Israel were delivered from slavery in Egypt. The bondage was so intense that the people cried out because of the severe oppression. It is now time for the descendants of those who were enslaved in Egypt to revisit the Exodus as they await deliverance from the land of their captivity. In this first session of the series, Remembering the First Exodus, we will take a look back at the prophecy given to Abraham and the events that led to Israel's captivity. Let's take a look at this entry from Holman Bible Dictionary about the Exodus. It says, Israel's escape from slavery in Egypt and journey towards the promised land under Moses. The most important event in the Old Testament, historically and theologically, is Israel's exodus from Egypt. More than 100 times in all parts of the Old Testament, except the wisdom literature, Yahweh is proclaimed as the one who brought you up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Israel remembered the Exodus as God's mighty redemptive act. She celebrated it in her creeds. She sang of it in worship. The prophets constantly reminded Israel that election and covenant were closely related to the Exodus. So it says the English word Exodus does not occur in the King James Version. The Exodus in the Old Testament was to Israel what the death and resurrection of Christ was to Christians in the New Testament. Just as Israel commemorated her deliverance from Egyptian bondage in the feast of Passover or Pesach, Christians celebrate their redemption from sin in the observance of the Lord's Supper. So what we have to understand is that this second Exodus will not go unnoticed. This will be a worldwide event that will cause the nations of the world to acknowledge that the Most High delivered his people out of their lands of captivity, just like he said. We lost sight of the significance of our deliverance out of Egypt, family. Of course, we know that our heritage was stripped from us, but our ancestors failed to remember the importance of Pesach as well. Let's read a bit more of this, because it's telling us that historically speaking, the accounts of the Exodus is mainly taken from the Bible. But it says no extra biblical witnesses directly speak of the sojourn of Israel's ancestors in the land of the Nile. However, Egyptian sources do confirm the general situation that we find in the end of Genesis and the beginning of the book of Exodus. There are many reports in Egyptian sources of nomadic people called Habiru coming into Egypt from the east, fleeing from famine. Extra biblical evidence from Egypt indicates that Egypt used slave labor in building projects. Now, if we think about the movie The Ten Commandments, those folks all look like Europeans for the most part. But they can't seem to explain how folks with pink skin could be working as slaves all day long in the hot sun, in Egypt nonetheless. But I digress. Let's go on. So it says the nature of the event. Some scholars see the Exodus as the miraculous deliverance of the people of God from the grip of Pharaoh's army at the Red Sea. Others see it as an escape across a sprawling wilderness and sweltering desert of a small mixed band of border slaves. Some argue that the military language in the account indicates that the event was a military skirmish. So, of course, we know these folks are trying to explain away this event. But we have an account in the Torah telling us what happened. Let's begin by defining the word Exodus. It means exit, departure, or a going out. I think many of us are sensing that that time is drawing near. We can see signs happening all around the world. Even those who are not spiritually inclined recognize that something is happening. As children of the Most High, we need to understand the significance of the first Exodus and see how it parallels with things we are facing in these last days. For those who are truly in tune with their Creator, it is obvious to us that these are not mere coincidences. No, these are signs. Even the blow-ups in the media are working together for our good. So let's take a look back in time to see what was happening with our ancestors leading up to their deliverance from bondage. Understanding these things will help us to prepare ourselves as best we can, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Let's look at some of the things that we need to remember. The Most High spoke through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 46:9 through 10, saying that we should remember the former things of old. And the Exodus is definitely one of those things. He wanted us to remember how he delivered our people with a mighty hand and forced the Egyptians to acknowledge him as the Almighty. And this is why he's telling us to remember these things. He also says that he is the one true Elohim. He says, there is none like me. He goes on to say, declaring the end from the beginning. He tells us the end from the beginning. And from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. And this is why we need to familiarize ourselves with these prophecies, because he's already made known what is to come. We shouldn't be caught off guard about what's coming. But notice that he also says that he will not do anything unless he reveals his secrets unto the prophets. Let's look at this in Amos 3:7. Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. There should be an echo, a word spoken in the heavens, and the prophets repeating those words in the earth. The challenge for many of us is in recognizing the prophetic voice. Oftentimes, the prophets are hated and dismissed. We tend to embrace those who say what we want to hear and not the things we need to hear. Let's look at the prophetic word that was given to Abraham, and I want to read this from the book of Jubilees. This is Jubilees 14:13 through 16. The account of this story can also be found in Genesis 15. It says, and it came to pass when the sun had set that an ecstasy fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. And it was said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall bring them into bondage and afflict them 400 years. Let me restate that. They, their captors, shall bring them into bondage and afflict them 400 years. And the nation also to whom they will be in bondage will I judge, and after that they shall come forth thence with much substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and be buried in a good old age. So our forefather Abraham was told beforehand what would happen to his descendants. I believe that this prophecy also serves as the banner prophecy concerning our situation today. Currently, our people are scattered to the four corners of the earth. Before there was a nation of Israel, it was recorded in the heavens that we would be enslaved in a land that is not ours. So the words of the prophecy was passed on to his descendants. Isaac knew about the prophecy, and so did Jacob. Listen to what the Most High said to Jacob in Genesis 35:12. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. So Jacob knew he was to inherit the land of promise. And the Most High reassured him of this word later on when Joseph sent for him to come to Egypt. Listen to these words found in Genesis 46:3-4. And he said, I am Yah, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. But you'll see here in Genesis 50:24 that Jacob's sons also knew about the prophetic word that was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because before Joseph died, he told his brethren that it was time for him to die, but he knew that the Most High was going to visit them. He said, and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware unto Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So these prophetic words were passed on to the children, and they taught it to their children. This is how it was supposed to work. So if you have children, I would highly encourage you to share these prophecies with them so that they will also know about the promises and the covenant that was given to us. So we looked at the prophecy given to Abraham about his seed being in bondage in a land that was not theirs. Now let's look at the dream given to Joseph, because it connects to that event. So this comes from Genesis 37:1-10, and I'll read it from the Septuagint. It says, and Jacob dwelt in the land where his father sojourned, in the land of Canaan or Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. And Joseph was 17 years old, feeding the sheep of his father, with his brethren being young, with the sons of Bala and the sons of Zelpha, the wives of his father. And Joseph brought to Israel their father their evil reproach. In other words, when they did something wrong, he came and reported it back to his father. And Jacob loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was to him the son of old age. And he made for him a coat of many colors. And his brethren, having seen that his father loved him more than all his sons, hated him, and could not speak anything peaceable to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and reported it to his brethren. And he said to them, hear this dream which I have dreamed. And I thought ye were binding sheaves in the middle of the field, and my sheaf stood up and was erected, and your sheaves turned around and did obedience to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed be Lord over us? And they hated him still more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed another dream, and related it to his father and to his brethren, and said, now I'm thinking at this point, why would you tell them the second dream when you know how they felt about the first one? But he did. He said, I have dreamed another dream, as it were the sun and the moon and the 11 stars did me reverence. And his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream which thou hast dreamed? Shall indeed both I and thy mother and thy brethren come and bow down before thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. Now, most of you know the rest of the story, that his brothers sold him into slavery and he ended up in Egypt. Can you imagine what it was like for Joseph, this young boy, having his own brothers sell him into slavery? Your own brothers. And why did they do it? Envy. But little did they know that one day their sons and daughters would be enslaved in that very land. But if you consider what the brothers did, it was an illegal act. Slave trading back then usually involved prisoners of war. They were spoils of war. These brothers were selling Joseph for money, and it was Judah who convinced his brothers to sell him into slavery. Why? For profit. You can read that in Genesis 37. So the ones who bought him were enslaving someone who had not been taken in war. This can really be viewed as kidnapping, and later under the law of Moses, it would be an offense punishable by death. Now, this would later happen to Messiah. He was handed over for money, and he had done nothing wrong. But yet again, the Most High used what was meant for evil for our good. It ushered in our spiritual redemption. But just like with Joseph, later generations would be held in bondage. So you need to understand, reaping and sowing is a principle. You may not pay for your wrongdoing, but just know there will be consequences later on. Of course, there will be some who will continue to say that the story of Israel being in bondage in Egypt had absolutely nothing to do with us, because they want to refute the fact that we are the descendants of those people. So let's just say it has nothing to do with us. Is there an explanation for this prophecy given by Messiah in Luke 21:24, where he says, And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentile be fulfilled. The key phrase here is that they are led away captive, as in forced into bondage. Do we have accounts of this happening after the death of Messiah? Yes. This is a map of the transatlantic slave trade depicting such an event. It is showing that this was a worldwide event, and enslaved people were trafficked, scattered around the world. So there was a prophetic word given, and here is historical proof that that did indeed happen. So, what is the end date on this captivity? We find the answer in the second part of this verse, where he says, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, unless you're blind in one eye and you just can't see out of the other, end time events are happening all around us. The kingdoms of the Gentiles are failing and falling. Their time is up. Now, we know that we are the descendants who pay that price. The sub-Saharan and transatlantic slave trade scattered us around the world just like Messiah said. As I have said repeatedly, this has not happened to any other race of people. This is one of the curses pointing to us being the people of the book. Yet, you have folks who cannot show that they experienced those curses to the same extent like we have, trying to say that they are the chosen people. Then they try to label us as a black Hebrew Israelite extremist group. But just like the Most High used the first Exodus to let the world know who his chosen were, he's doing the same thing today. And you all, these folks know the truth. I want you to look at this. I came across this source, and it's entitled The Selling of Joseph. This was written by Samuel Sewall in the 1700. The link is here if you want to read it. But I want to show you that they have known. This is considered the first anti-slavery pamphlet published in New England. So let me give you the backstory about this pamphlet. Samuel Sewall was a prominent minister and magistrate in Boston. He was responding to a public controversy over the status of Adam, an enslaved servant held by another magistrate, and his name was John Sathan. So Sathan had promised Adam his freedom, and then he reneged on his promise. So Adam fought it in court. And the dispute went on for 3 years before Adam and his wife finally became free in 1703. But I found an interesting statement in the pamphlet that I want to share with you. Let's take a look at this. Listen to the introduction by Rachel Edmonston. It says, "The Selling of Joseph, published on June 24, 1700 by Samuel Sewall, was the first anti-slavery pamphlet published in North America. Sewall, who resided in Boston and earned his living as a merchant and a judge, wrote the pamphlet as a direct response to a petition that urged the freeing of a Negro and his wife, who were unjustly held in bondage. Sewall also may have been prompted to write by the rise in the number of enslaved persons living in Massachusetts. According to the historian Mark Peterson, the number of slaves in Massachusetts more than doubled between 1676 and 1708, from roughly 200 to about 550. And 75% of those 550 slaves lived in the city of Boston. Indeed, slavery was legal in all 13 colonies in 1700, and it was only during the American Revolution that northern states began to make strides to abolish the institution. Sewall entitled the pamphlet "The Selling of Joseph" to remind readers of the biblical figure of Joseph, son of Jacob, who was unjustly sold into slavery by his brothers. Within the pamphlet, Sewall relied heavily on biblical passages to refute common contemporary arguments in favor of slavery. Upon publication, Sewall's pamphlet was attacked by a judge named John Sathan and eventually fell into obscurity, having been reprinted once in the 18th century and then again only once more in 1863. Now look at the statement that he wrote. He said, "It is observable that the Israelites were strictly forbidden the buying or selling one another for slaves." And then he lists the Bible passages to show that. And God gauged his blessing in lieu of any loss they might conceit they suffered thereby. And since the partition wall is broken down, inordinate self-love should likewise be demolished. God expects that Christians should be of a more ingenuous and benign frame of spirit. Christians should carry it all to the world, as the Israelites were to carry it one towards another. And for men obstinately to persist in holding their neighbors and brethren under the rigor of perpetual bondage seems to be no proper way of gaining assurance that God has given them spiritual freedom. Listen to this. Our blessed Savior has altered the measures of the ancient love song and set it to a most excellent new tune, which all ought to be ambitious of learning. These Ethiopians, as black as they are, seeing they are the sons and daughters of the first Adam, the brethren and sister of the last Adam, and offspring of God, they ought to be treated with a respect agreeable. So you tell me, did they know who we were as people of the book? Of course they did. But even though many of them knew about our true heritage, greed compelled them to maintain the institution of slavery. So I want to read this commentary that was written about this pamphlet, The Selling of Joseph. It says, giving with one hand, Sewall takes away with another, making racist secular arguments for the ill effects of slavery on the colony. Even if enslaved Africans were to become free, Sewall writes, they can seldom use their freedom well. And, he argues, they were obviously not able to integrate, to fight for the colony, or to marry into the general population. Free black people, he writes, would remain in our body politic as a kind of extravasate blood. In other words, an undesirable and unharmonious presence. Let's pause and think about that statement. He's saying these people we brought here as slaves, they're not going to be able to integrate into the colony or to fight for the colony or to marry into the general population. So what benefit would they be to us if they were freed? They would only be the undesirables among us. But the question comes to mind, why not compensate them and send them back to the places where you took them from, or give them their own land away from the general population? But those things wouldn't have been profitable because we were brought here so that they would be enriched. So again, the love of money is the root of all evil. And that is what led Joseph's brothers to sell him into slavery. How did they live with themselves for all of those years after what they had done? They knew that they had sold their brother. They saw their father suffer. And yet they said nothing and they did nothing to try to rectify it. But there's always going to be a day of reckoning. You will reap what you have sown. And they did. And that's a warning to the nations that sold and enslaved our people. The Most High saw those wicked deeds. So they have their day of reckoning coming, and they will not escape. But the Most High allowed these things, just like he did with Joseph. He allowed it because of our disobedience, and that's why we're here. But again, it will work together in his plan. Let's keep going. Now, just like there are prophetic words given about our blessings, the inheritance, the promise, the covenant, etc., there were also prophecies given about what happens if we disobey. And these words should also be passed down to the next generation. And this is where we kept messing up. We failed to remember what was written and what was said. So let's look at this warning that Moses would later give to our ancestors. But in it, we also find instructions on what we should be doing now in the land of our captivity. And this comes from Deuteronomy 4:23 through 31. It says, "Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make you a graven image, or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God has forbidden thee. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. When thou shalt beget children and children's children, and ye shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a graven image or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of the Lord thy God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto ye go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you, and there ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if," listen to this, "but if from there, you will seek the Lord thy God, you will find him, if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days." Those are the times that we're living in right now. Here's what we need to do. It says, "If thou turn to the Lord thy God, and shalt be obedient unto his voice. For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them." So I guess we know the rest of the story, right? Obviously so, or we wouldn't be in the land of our captivity. And yes, a prophetic word was given about that as well, because the Most High knew. He already knew that we were going to disobey and become rebellious. So what happened every time we disobeyed? We were taken into captivity. Instead of being the head, we became the tail. And let's look at the result. This comes from Hosea 3:4-5. "For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without teraphim." But look at what happens afterwards. "Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness." When does this happen? In the latter days. So let's look at the prophetic word that was given to Joel, the prophet Joel, in Joel 2:23-32, because this is a word We need to be standing on today, particularly in these days and times. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, that's us, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you the former rain moderately. And he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty, and be satisfied, and praise the name of your God. We will praise our Most High, that has dealt wondrously with us. And it says, and my people shall never be ashamed. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else. And my people shall never be ashamed. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Yet there are some who insist on saying that only the sons of Zion should be speaking in these last days. Let me read that again. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit, and I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. So we have to understand that we have been given a word from on high, that the sons and daughters will prophesy in the last days. So we need to hear something, we need to see something, and we need to say something. And we can only do that when we connect with the kingdom of heaven. Let's go on. The words from that prophecy should sustain us until everything that the Most High has said concerning us is fulfilled. As we see here in Numbers 23:19, the Almighty is faithful to his word. He is not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he should repent. Has he said, and shall he not do it? Or has he spoken, and shall he not make it good? Never. So we cannot be forgetful hearers, Israel. It's time to remember what has been prophesied concerning us. We need to remember and meditate on these prophetic words as we prepare for the second Exodus. So this session was about setting some foundational things in place as we continue on with this series. So if this message has been a blessing, please hit the like, share it, and join me next time. Shalom, everyone.
Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation.